is here this evening. As we begin in 15 seconds, as we begin our committee meeting in 10 seconds, and in 5 seconds, we will begin. Good afternoon and welcome to the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting for August 29th, 2023. As always, we acknowledge our elected officials, the leaders of the city of Roswell, Mayor Kurt Wilson, Councilmember Christine Hall, Councilmember Michael Palermo, Councilmember Sarah Beeson, Councilmember G. Lee Hills, Councilmember William Morthland. I'm Randy Knighton, the City Administrator, joined by City Attorney David Davidson and Executive Assistant to Mayor and Council, Michelle Miller. The purpose of committee meetings are for city departments to convey information to the Mayor and City Council and discuss initiatives listed on the published agenda by ordinance. The committee consists of Mayor and Council as well as the City Administrator, and the City Administrator serves as chair of committee meetings. This is a public meeting, but not a public hearing. Therefore, while members of the public are certainly welcome to attend, we do not take public comments or questions during committee meetings unless specifically authorized by Mayor and Council. Public comments or questions are received at regular City Council meetings on the second and fourth Monday of each month and the fifth Monday of each month in open forum. We do encourage residents to engage our online platforms, and if you have any questions or need information, please contact our staff and we'll provide that information to you. In addition, we certainly encourage everyone to download the Roswell app and web service portal. We also encourage everyone to view our calendar of events at roswell365.com. The first item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes for the Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting for July 25th, 2023. Motion by Councilmember Hills, second by Councilmember Beeson. Any further discussion? All in favor? Passes unanimously. Thank you. The next item on the agenda under Community Development, item number 2, approval of Tree Bank Fund Administration FY 2024 project list and approval of budget amendment 2457140-01-08-14-23 in the amount of $648,000. Is that Mr. Gaines? Ms. Bromberg? Yes, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. So I understand that this was brought back to committee after it was placed on the Mayor and Council agenda, and that there were some questions about the scope of what the funds can be expended on. So I've got before you on the screen is the section of code that specifically allows for the city to use the funds that have been donated into the Roswell Tree Bank to be used for the sole purpose of planting and maintaining trees and other applicable landscaping for public benefit on public property. It can also be in private property if there's been an easement granted the city that gives us that opportunity to plant on some private property. That is not something that we've actually done yet, but it is an option. And then maintenance is limited to those trees and shrubs, small trees. It does exclude maintenance of grass lawns. And in addition to that, council, when this was updated the last time, added that other associated project tasks that may be permitted to also use these funds are specifically related to things that can enhance tree growth. For example, tree boxes or porous pavement. These are stormwater elements that can help and be used adjacent to trees. And so that was a choice at that time to allow those types of ancillary costs to be associated with these projects so far. And of course, these are all subject to Mayor and Council approval. So I also have, in the packet is the list that was requested to be approved for fiscal 24. We can certainly go through that. I have some additional information to share with you tonight, but I wanted to stop first and see, are there any questions about prior expenditures that want to be discussed before we go into the 24 project list?
Mayor Wilson.
Mr. Chairman, based upon the scope of potential reach of the projects, would it be appropriate to ask the Environmental Public Works Director the Rec and Parks Director and the Transportation Director also to join us in this conversation at the table.
Sure, if that is the wishes of the committee to support the conveyance of information for this item, absolutely.
And while they're coming to the table, one of the things that the departments and I have been working on since the direction to move this back to committee was we have added some additional notes in the version that we have. We did not put this into the packet, but we've got it available today to talk specifically about the projects, what the scope is of those projects that are being requested for the fiscal 24 funds, and then what specifically, any additional information that might be needed to explain what that means. So we're happy to share that as well. And then I think we've also got some information on prior projects that have been completed if we would like to go through those. So I will maybe open it up to see how this group would like for me to proceed.
Councilmember Palermo.
Jason, come back up.
So first of all, thank you for adding this column E. I think that is helpful because I think that's where a lot of the discussion is. Because I think as discussed at that council meeting and as we've discussed in the past, ultimately where the money that comes for this tree bank fund is for when trees are being cut down. So we want to make sure that we are adding back to our tree canopy and helping maintain Roswell being a great green place to live. And so I do want to clarify something as I see maintenance of existing trees and some of those things I call the question. When we originally discussed and staff's request was to add maintenance into it, and that's where there was the request even for grass lawn, cutting grass, and we're like, that is not to be from the tree fund. The discussion on the maintenance of the trees was in the sense of that maintenance preserving and extending the life of the tree. And so that's where I just want to make sure that this tree fund is doing things that are going to help extend the life of the canopy that we have and the green location that we have. And this is not just a place to pull money from for aspects of cutting limbs that aren't helping and enhancing the life and the preservation of the tree.
Sure, I can absolutely address that. So there are 3 ways that the money has been approved for and spent in the past. One would be the removal of a tree within an area that has died, and the threat of it falling and damaging other trees around it has led to the need to be able to remove it, and so the funds have gone towards that. Same thing with with trimming. If the tree needs some removal of some limbs on it in order to extend the life of the tree, that has come into play. And then we've also done treatment of the trees themselves. For example, I believe it's in the cemetery where we've done treatment of the root system to try and preserve the life of the specimen trees, such as the larger old oaks that are in there. So you've seen that kind of in 3 different ways. And I think so far we've actually used it for all 3 of those purposes, which was what the intent was when maintenance was originally added to it, was to allow that flexibility. It's not intended to go and just say, oh, let's take down a lot of dead trees just for the heck of it. It is in select locations where it's intended to protect the health of the other trees around it.
Other questions? Councilmember Beeson.
One of the public comments we had received the evening that this was pulled back off of the council, I think it was consent agenda, and then it was moved back to committee, was the question about shrubs obviously being included as part of the code, and that was what prompted, I think, some of the questions. Looking through this list currently, the majority of these are for tree plantings, or to the point that you just made, the maintenance of the trees, or there is a removal of dead trees. Are there instances in which we use shrubs often, or what would the applicability be of when we use the tree bank funds to go towards shrubbery in lieu of trees?
Sure, and I might actually ask Jeff to answer this a little bit as well, but I can say I've seen examples of project plans where there were what you would all think of as a tree, a trunk with leaves at the top, but there are some things that are actually classified as shrubs. For example, a holly. It looks like a tree once it grows, but it actually is classified as a shrub. And so the intent was to allow us some flexibility for some of those under and mid-story. We want to have that trifecta of vegetation in our wooded areas. And so that was the reasoning behind that. And so it's been selectively used for some of those types of shrubs. And then there's also been some allowances when we've got tree planting, say in a bioretention area. You might have some grasses and lower level shrubs that are associated with that. It's a very small component of the project compared to the cost of the trees. And so that was the other piece where that might come into play. We haven't had a ton of those actually completed. We've been some flipping and flopping because the bond's coming in. We've kind of moved some things around. But that was what the incentive that was, where the tree count is the priority as far as the funding amount. And we do review those. So when those come to us and they show us what the expenditures have been on before those invoices or the recs are approved, we have to see those line items. And if there's things that are in there that aren't in conformance with this project description that's been provided to you for approval, or it includes something that's like, well, wait, that has nothing to do with any of these things, we can't use these funds, you have to find another way to fund that.
Yes, Councilwoman Beeson.
So to clarify, in this situation, it promotes biodiversity, it promotes diverse vegetation. We're not taking these tree funds and then miraculously City Hall gets some nice new box shrubs out of it, and the trees are all going away. It really is promoting diversity of the I guess in this case, the flora.
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
wonderful, thank you.
Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. I'll just give my opinion on that. I think it would be foolish for us to remove the opportunity to use tree bank fund money for landscaping, and I'm with you. It shouldn't be an overall landscaping of monkey grass, you know.
That was what I was gonna use, actually.
Lirio, you know, whatever. But one of the things I think we've not done a great job at, and we're working on this currently with this administration, is to have a cohesive plan when we put in plantings. So certainly, I'm a tree for a tree mentality, but it doesn't make sense in every application, especially when I think about transportation, that everything's exposed when we go back and plant. It's not hidden in a copse of trees. It is right there front and center. The roundabout is done or the intersections is approved, and then we put in landscaping and it is on display. And I think it would be silly for us to have a whole row of trees that are gorgeous and then have nothing else below it. And I'm not talking about grass. I'm talking about multi-levels. And Lenore, you said it in a much more sexy manner, but I just think it would be irresponsible. But by saying that, I want to talk back out at the other side of my mouth that I do think that the intent is the trees, that this is a tree for tree mentality, but I don't think that's appropriate for the human experience in our city. So aesthetics and being deliberate with how we plant throughout the city so we have some consistency and thoughtfulness, I think it's very important.
Mayor Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Lenore, a question for you, and then I want to direct a question to the directors as well, if I will. So the list that we have in front of us, the color-coded list by departments, this list was determined, is this a priority list? Is this a list of priorities in terms of how how the tree bank fund will be spent?
We still owe you the prioritization of the list that these would happen in order. We need to add that to this. That was something we were gonna bring back to committee once it made it through the approval process. And I'll be honest with you, I just hadn't had a chance to get that from the staff before tonight, but that would be something that would be coming back to you, is what's the prioritization of the order of them. I think they all have relatively equal priority, with the exception of a few projects that we know have been delayed. For example, UPW's project at the transfer station, we have tree plantings, just trees associated with that, but we can't do it till the very end. So we've got some that we know that the priority is high, but the schedule is pushed out. So we need to give that information to you, because that's something you asked.
And in terms of the priorities, can you also put the timetables? So start date, end date, et cetera. And then I got a question, and I really it's for everybody, but I asked Jeff, Director Littlefield. Jeff, do we, forgive me, and I apologize for just asking this out of the blue, do we currently have some kind of median project that we're working on with the state or our own recognizance on Highway 140? Don't we have some kind of median project? And when is that in development right now? What's the status of that project? So on the east side of the city, on Highway 140, we've got a median project to ostensibly beautify, hey, go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, there's.
Okay, three islands, okay. And is there potential to do more than that by any chance? Do we have the potential of doing more than 3 medians from a beautification and traffic perspective? And the reason I'm bringing that up is I don't see that project on this list, and I'm assuming, forgive me for doing that, that there's trees and shrubbery involved in those medians? And if not, I'm going to suggest that maybe, and I don't know if it would directly refer to the tree bank or not, but obviously I'm suggesting that maybe trees and greenery be a big part of the potential medians on the east side on 140. And I don't know where we are, so I apologize for asking this out of the blue.
Yeah, it's already funded. We have about $540,000.
We funded that already, FY '24, correct? So let me just kind of throw this out in the atmosphere. I'm just gonna make a guess here, and the committee can quickly shut me down. There'd probably be an appetite to make sure that those medians look really pretty with lots of green, lots of trees. And if some of that needs to be part of the tree bank, I'm assuming that the committee would probably say, oh yes, let's make that happen. And I don't see it as part of this list, so I just wanted to kind of throw that out in the atmosphere. Sorry, Lenore.
No, you're fine, sir.
Councilmember Morthland, how did you?
Getting back to the prior comments, you know, the tree for tree piece, that's the intent, and that's where everybody's mind needs to be on this. But I know I've asked for a specific project to potentially use some tree bank funds for a rework of a walking trail and down in the Mill Village area, and the feedback that I got was we can't go back in with a specific tree that used to be in that very spot because of X, Y, and Z factors. But you can go back in with something that is very, very close, that technically would be a shrub, or of the shrub family, grows to be the size of a tree. And we were talking about that a couple of weeks ago due to fire and rescue connectivity down there, but a couple of other things. And so that was really why I wanted to circle back around is with the shrubbery piece, that does need to stay, just to give us that flexibility. But the original intent, obviously, is tree for tree. No question about that.
Councilmember, Hall.
So I think we're looking at this list and then, correct me if I'm wrong, colleagues, we're looking at this list and then we're also looking at maybe changing or clarifying how we do our ordinance going forward. And my question to Lenore is, I believe we've never gotten through the entire list. There's always carryover from the tree fund, or traditionally there has been.
Correct. Most years, there's some reason that usually it's a scheduling issue or we have a very short planting time frame and we are very aggressive in what we think we can accomplish in a very short amount of time. So yes, there are typically some projects that for some reason are not able to occur in the fiscal year. We hope that they will, and we ask to move them to the next if it's still a viable project or it hasn't been funded some other way. Because some have gotten funded through other means along the way.
So just to follow up, so perhaps we could go through and prioritize the items that are tree and shrub and executable, where we have a common agreement of what the intent is, and then come back with more clarity at another time.
Mayor Wilson?
I think, yeah, Christina, kind of just got to follow up on your thinking there. And so, Director Leatherman, how involved is the arborist in the tree bank fund and the determination of the decisions from the respective departments?
So I can speak to the arborist from just our parks perspective, is that we have an arborist and then we have a landscape architect on our team. The arborist is on ComDev's team, and we will call in the arborist when we need assessments of trees, especially those that are potentially in decay, or we need an assessment on a removal or some sort of treatment that will help with the survivability of that tree. Alongside of that, our landscape architect will work on either the design of the replacement or also make recommendations in conjunction with our arborists on the health of those trees. So we'll use them in a variety of different ways to promote kind of the positive impacts that we're working through on the tree bank fund.
Yeah, the majority of projects fall under recreation and parks. I mean, they're pretty well split up. And that's why I'm asking, I guess the arborist is how much, obviously, who's making the final call, I guess, on the determination of these projects?
For like
Arborist or the landscape
for the
architect?
removal of a tree.
Yeah, because this is a tree bank fund, so like who's really kind of driving the decision making?
May I ask a clarifying question to make sure you're understanding what you're asking? Are you asking who is involved in determining what's involved in these projects, or when someone gets a permit to remove a tree?
I'm not asking about a permit to remove a tree. I'm asking in respect to the tree bank fund. You've got skill sets and expertise internally.
Right.
A landscape architect is one thing, an arborist is another.
True.
Right, so, and probably 65% of the projects are Parks and Recs projects, so,
Right.
and the arborist is gonna be heavily involved, I'm thinking, in a lot of that input in terms of these projects.
Not usually. The arborist may, as Jeff alluded to, would be involved if there's a question about, is there some method or some treatment that we should propose to do on this tree in order to help sustain its life. Designing the landscape plans, that involves the landscape architect, who's making recommendations on looking at the native plant list, what makes sense from a tree perspective and a plant perspective based on the amount of sunlight in that particular area. So they have two very distinct roles. Our arborist happens to also be a landscape architect, so he has filled both roles at one time, but the arborist is specifically looking at health of trees, and then the landscape architect would be making proposals for what would be the best thing to plant there. That's the kind of the distinction in those roles. I don't know if that helps or makes it worse, but.
So, back to the question, who's driving the final decision-making that's getting to you guys?
On what's getting planted and designed comes through the landscape architect and the design team and up through the department director. And then I finalize that list and recommend it to Lenore and her team.
So the arborist role is simply relating to the health, the well-being of the existing trees, and nothing with respect to planting of new trees?
Correct. That's where the landscape architect comes in. And then the landscape architect will take on the resolution that was passed from a native plant perspective and apply those planting methodologies to the landscape plan as a whole.
So the landscape architect's driving most of the.
Like the design side of it.
decision
Yes, sir.
making of
The recommendation side, yes, sir. Yep.
Excuse me. Yes, Councilmember Morthland?
Out of curiosity, how much did we spend last year out of the tree bank fund?
One moment. We spent almost $151,000.
And we have,
And we have about $48,000 in the fund today.
and last year, how much did the fund raise through fees and?
I don't believe I have that table with me. I presented it last time I was here. I want to say it was only about maybe $30,000 to $50,000 last year. We had prior years where we might see upwards of $150,000 to $200,000 in fees that would come in
Okay.
from those permits.
So that's a good clarifying point to what we're talking about here is on a high side, we're going to be bringing in some odd $1,000 on an annual basis. We're not bringing in $600,000. So a lot of these projects are good wish list, and we got to come back with priorities from that standpoint.
Further questions or comments at this time? Councilmember Palermo?
Thank you, and so certainly I expect a list to move forward tonight, but with Councilmember Morthland's point out, which is a very accurate one, is why I think it is so important that staff and mayor and council do look at fine-tuning the ordinance and the guidance around it, because ultimately, when we're not bringing in as much as the, it's not enough for just any and every possible project. So I just want to make sure it is getting the most bang for the buck for replacing actual canopy and all those things, but I think some good discussion.
All right. Any further questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Hills.
So is it fair to say that we're comfortable moving forward with a prioritization list coming to us next and then moving on with the tree bank fund? I am. A motion to move forward, knowing that a prioritization list is coming for us to take a look at our next juncture, which would be council meeting, correct? Beautiful.
Motion by Councilmember Hills, second by Councilmember Beeson. Just one point of clarification for my sake. So this list would move forward, And then the prioritization list would be provided at council or come back to a future committee for determination by mayor and council.
Just to come back, I would say. We'll make those decisions on the dais.
I'd say come to council, when we can talk about that on the side, so I think
Okay.
we've got a pretty good handle on where we are and each of our perspectives, and it doesn't sound like there's a whole lot of conflict there,
Sure.
so.
Okay.
I believe we
Just
can
wanted to clarify.
socialize that and then make a very deliberate decision in our next
Okay.
council meeting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Beeson?
To reiterate what Councilmember Hills just said, I agree. Additionally, the prioritization is really what we're going to be voting on in the council meeting. I don't see a need to hold it up in that process. And I realize that this was taken back to committee because we wanted to make sure that we're completely clear in the policy and its application. Personally, I think I'm good with the current policy as it's enacted based off of how all of staff has provided input on how they use that policy. I don't want to speak for Councilmember Hills who's making the motion, but I'm good with the policy as it exists, and I think we are comfortable with it moving forward once we have the prioritization at the next meeting.
Okay, all right.
Made sure I understand that clearly. I don't want there to be any confusion. So on the September 18th council meeting, you want this list with prioritization and begin and end dates presented to you at council?
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, I just want to make sure I was hearing everything the same way you were.
All right.
Thank you for the clarification.
So the motion by Councilmember Hills and second by Councilmember Beeson. All good to go? All right. Any further discussion? All right. Seeing none, all in favor? All right. Thank you very much. Passes unanimously. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Under transportation, item number 3, discussion of the concept for the Grimes Bridge Road Corridor Improvement Project to not include roundabouts at entrances to residential neighborhoods. Mr. Littlefield, Mr. Cox, and Mr. Nicholas. All right.
Well, good evening. This was an item that staff was requested to bring on tonight's agenda, just to recap some of the draft concepts that have been presented in the past, with some emphasis about some of the roundabout locations that have been previously proposed. There were 3 roundabout locations proposed at Grimes Bridge Landing. Again, this is on the Grimes Bridge Road corridor between Oxbow and Dogwood. There was one proposed at Grimes Bridge Landing, one at the Cottage School entrance, and one at Vickery Lane where there's an existing traffic signal. I have some graphics to show you in just a minute. These were primarily proposed for traffic calming elements along the corridor. That was one of the top priorities that the public had identified. And also some of the other traffic calming options that we might be included in the scope ultimately are just narrower lanes via lane striping, moving in the curb line as part of the sidewalk or multi-use trail project, adding additional speed feedback signs, and also the public was consulted about adding school zones at the 2 private schools, the Swift School and the Cottage School. This is the location of Oxbow Road is to the west off of here. This is Grimes Bridge Landing. This is one of the roundabouts proposed. This is on the western end of the corridor. It is kind of along the kind of on the downslope or the kind of downhill side of it. This was proposed and showed to the public. I think we had a public meeting on May 15th is when this was presented to the public. This was alternate A. We also had 2 other locations. Alternate B included a second roundabout here at the Cottage School along with the one that was at Grimes Bridge Landing. I apologize, it's getting cut off here on the left. And then alternate C had one at Vickery Lane and also at Grimes Bridge Landing. Just to note, Vickery Lane, there is an existing traffic signal there today. That was also proposed. And again, the yellow you can see here is a proposed multi-use trail, which I believe the public was in favor of along the corridor. And then this is the eastern end of the corridor. There's no roundabouts here, but just so you're familiar with it, the multi-use trail is proposed to come eastward to Dogwood at the existing traffic light by Signal, or the Swift School. And then there'd be a multi-use trail proposed along Dogwood from basically the hotel where there'd be a pedestrian crosswalk and a pedestrian signal, all the way down in front of the apartments and all the way down to Riverside Drive, which would ultimately connect to our Riverside Drive project, which also has multi-use trails in our riverfront. We're asked to bring this to council at the committee this evening for additional guidance and discussion. So I'll yield for questions.
Mr. Cox, thank you. Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you, Mr. Knight, and Mr. Cox, thank you for that background. So just a little background and the reason why I think it is helpful to make sure we're updating the concept. So from T-Splosh 2, when Councilmember Hall and I were the two from this committee that were on council, it was really important, just given the potential risks to really quality of life, et cetera, on Grimes Bridge. We had as a part of the T-Splosh 2, which passed, of course, by the council as well as by the public, to have over about $10 million for really just reducing speeds, increasing safety, and really making sure that we're not turning Grimes Bridge into an unsafe thoroughfare. And so ultimately, I know with the concept that you had, which had the potential roundabouts at entries to neighborhoods, and then certainly in seeing some residents, most affected and in the Grimes Bridge corridor, really concerned and frankly opposing those. I think it's really important that if we're spending money, it's going to be for what benefits those most affected. And so that's where I appreciate you sharing on the slide some different potential ways to reduce the speeds. I think there's even more. We're not going to get into the 2-hour discussion tonight on all the different things. Forwarded an email from a resident today, getting into even just some different examples. I think, actually, to be honest, I think I forwarded you one email. I should have forwarded you two, so that was my mistake. We'll certainly forward the second one, but even just some residents having some great ideas that are low cost, minimize the right-of-way needed, and just really making sure that there's a solution that really is hitting and addressing the issue, is to really make sure that the quality of life is being maximized and not taking undue land and all those different aspects. So that's where I just wanted to get the, because again, I was knowing that this is going to be something that's, this $10 million needs to be spent for something that's really going to benefit all the different communities that lives off the Grimes Bridge area. Just wanted to make sure, to eliminate the confusion, that we remove the roundabouts from the neighborhood entrances. And certainly I have a lot of confidence that RDOT and Mayor and Council and will certainly be continuing to look at the ways to most efficiently spend the money and most efficiently increase the safety of Grimes Bridge, and making sure we're doing everything we can to minimize the, or frankly, prevent it from becoming any type of cut-through or thoroughfare in the future once GDOT builds its bridge. So that's really the purpose. I like the other stuff that you got, but I think it's probably a little outside the scope to spend 2 hours walking through kind of the different ways to accomplish that goal. I just want to make sure that RDOT publicly, again, is reminded of just what the goal is, which I think was really well articulated from an email today, as well as just eliminating the concern of the roundabouts being at the neighborhood entrances.
Thank you.
And actually, one last thing, sorry, before I yield my time. Now, knowing this was just a concept, is a concept even something that was approved by Mayor and Council? Basically, the reason I ask is this something that needs to go to a Mayor and Council meeting, or is this, because it's just in the concept stage, which is an earlier stage, is it something where we just need to give guidance at committee?
So we brought this to committee last January, and then we took it out to the public in May. So we are ultimately going to have to bring this back for the final determination on concept before we move forward. And so we have to bring that to committee or council at a later date.
Okay, and then so in that case, so what I'm hearing is today, all this guidance is, my request is that this Mayor and Council would concur on the guidance that the neighborhood entrances would not have the roundabouts, and that RDOT has more work to do with the public feedback to make sure the key goal is being addressed.
Councilmember Hall.
Thank you. And thank you for bringing this forward and going out to the public for the feedback. I have a question. I seem to recall when we had conversations, I think we met with the Grimes Bridge folks early on, 3 years ago. There was also talk about islands, basically perhaps doing the islands in the middle of the road and doing the bump out. Was that part of the presentation? I just, I'm going back in my recollection to see if that was an option that, and I don't know if that takes less land than a roundabout, and if it serves the same purpose, if that was something that was presented to the residents.
I don't think it was presented to the public. It does take a little more space than what is out there due to the topo. There's some pretty severe grades out there, which would require taking more land.
And for that reason, with it, I don't want to do all the solutioneering this evening. I think it's just a matter of if we can get consensus that the neighborhood entrances, the working concept from RDOT would not have roundabouts at those neighborhood entrances, and just that you all would take back and be ready to present to council as well as present to the community what the recommendations are and the updates to the concept based on community feedback and other ideas that you have.
Councilmember Hills.
Thank you, Mr. Knighton. Thank you for that, Councilmember Palermo. Transportation experts, could you walk us through, and not in great detail, this is a hot topic here, this area, and we've been working on it longer than I've been in office. And wanted to know if you could give us an idea of where we are right now. I know Oxbow has just opened back up, so we've got a new traffic flow right now that's been reintroduced, and then also what kind of study is going on right there. And then the other thing I want to just take ownership is that I personally, I've talked to quite a few people in the Grimes Bridge area, saying that I'm not ready to pull the trigger on anything just yet because we have so many unknowns right now with the express lane bridge is still floating out there, but it's several years out. We've got brand new introduction of traffic through Oxbow, and we haven't decided through what our residents have told us and exploring other avenues of slowing the traffic on that area. But just a snapshot of where we are on assessing the needs or the where we are right now on Grimes Bridge. Can you just give a little recap on that, please?
Yeah, so with the opening of Oxbow Road, one of our top priorities was to do a speed study and traffic counts. We did that, I think, the week before Fulton County schools opened. Cobb County was back in session at that point. And we're planning to do it again along with Grimes Bridge Road, hopefully within the next couple weeks, to make sure to see what the traffic, if there's been a full rebound, we want to let those commuting patterns get reestablished. We want to do that first, and it usually takes about 2 weeks after school gets back in session. So we're preparing to do that now.
And then just for the sake of listeners and attendees here, thank you who are here, can you, do you have a crystal ball or intel from GDOT on their determination on when the express lanes map will be published, exactly where that'll be? Have you gotten any, I know we've talked every week, but do you have anything new just for the sake of those that are not in the liaison meeting with you all and me?
The latest that we've heard is that procurement for the 400 express lane project will be late Q1, early Q2 of next year. That's when you'll see the rendering of what will be out there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Councilmember Beeson.
I was at the meeting in May, and I know Councilmember Hills was there as well. I didn't personally see anybody from Cottage School. I'm not sure if you did. Has anybody reached out to Cottage School directly or any representation from them to see their input, especially with this possibly proposed roundabout that is in front of their school? To see if there's any implications either to carpool, people getting in and out of school, or concerns about safety.
We had a meeting with the Cottage School and some other stakeholders along the corridor, separate of the public meetings. So they are aware of the roundabout option, but we have not circled back with them beyond the last public meeting.
No, neither for nor against. They haven't issued any opinions about it?
They don't love the roundabout.
Okay.
But they would want to see some more information on how it might work. They have some concerns on their loading and
Yeah,
offloading
carpool times.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you.
Councilmember Palermo.
Thank you. And so again, I'm not weighing in on the Cottage School one because, as mentioned, I don't know, where they where they stand on it. And I think it is great to hear, though, that even if they have some concerns, they want to see exactly how it would work and all those aspects. So that's great. But certainly seen and heard regarding for the neighborhoods, and again, knowing one of the neighborhoods already has a stoplight. So I think what would be helpful from here as just a next step, if you have the guidance of really looking at other solutions instead of roundabouts for the neighborhood on just what are all the different possible solutions and what is going to best help the goal. And again, as I mentioned, I thought resident email articulated really well of just knowing at all times you have to know what's the problem you're looking to solve, and just making sure that it's being looked at from that perspective, just to make sure that this does not turn into a thoroughfare when GDOT eventually builds their bridge, and frankly, to make sure that $10 million is spent as efficiently and goes as far as it can. And obviously, roundabouts are more expensive than other solutions, just given right of way and other aspects, just to make sure that we're truly spreading that across the corridor.
Mayor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I think to the collective thinking, I think is remember what it is exactly that we're discussing and what is the ultimate goal. And I think it's discussion of the concept for the Grimes Bridge Road Corridor Improvement Project to not include roundabouts as entrances to residential neighborhoods. And I think the overall perspective is, it's very easy to get kind of caught in singular conversations, is to go back to when you guys were in council in 2019, I believe it was, was it 2019? 2020? 2020? When you guys voted in and said, hey, we understand the state's got some projects in play, and what can we do about it? And really what you did about it was you got $10 million basically put aside for traffic calming measures. To say, look, we know that we're going to see some increased traffic in these areas. It's detrimental to our quality of life. It's detrimental to people who live in these neighborhoods. What can we do to negate or mitigate some of that? And I think to the points that I think have been established with us, and you said it well yourself, Jeff, is like procurement first or second quarter, and you may want to explain that a little bit so everybody understands that. Procurement first, second quarter in 2024 is when the developer should be announced, right, for the Georgia 400 project. I'll let you elaborate. You'll do it better than I will.
Yeah, the end of quarter one, beginning of quarter two, anticipated the developer will be chosen. Right now, I think they have 2 candidates. They had 3, 1 dropped out. I think that's partially why it got pushed out from the end of this year. What that means is that the project will begin, basically. It will be talked about in the public. Right now, it's kind of quiet because they can't talk about it right now.
And to your point, so it'll become public, the developer will be known. The project obviously has it has stated goals and stated design plans, but with the developer, there may be some manifestations of some things that may change potentially and might even impact the Roswell piece of that. And we don't know that for a fact, but there's the possibility of that. And so I think there's wisdom, Mike, to what you're suggesting is before you try to solve for the traffic mitigation and traffic calming issues on Grimes Bridge, there are some things we probably need to know. And we may not know those for another 6, 9, 12 months. And so I think we need to be sober about, before we get too far ahead of the court and try to do all of our solution making, there's some things we might take some time on. And as hard as it is, we may not have all the solutions today to say, how are we going to spend that $10 million? And so if I hear you correctly, the guidance that you're suggesting is, let's take the roundabouts off of the entrances to the subdivisions off the table today as for consideration in some of our planning, that's what I understand.
Exactly, and for RDOT to work on finding other solutions and making sure to have an exhaustive list to make sure every possible solution is thought of and suggested and discussed.
Is the thought kind of stated, is the committee kind of like in agreement with that thought at this juncture?
Just for clarification, that's literally just the neighborhood accesses.
Yes, that's where.
Cottage school is still a possibility.
Yeah, cottage school, the way I see it is you'd see maybe yes recommendation, maybe no recommendation. It's still potentially on the table. That doesn't mean it will occur, but it just means it's a possibility still for cottage school only.
All right. Councilmember Beeson?
just as a recommendation, though, I realize we're talking about the roundabout specifically in this situation, but I do think we should continue moving forward with any potential traffic calming that we can use in the interim on Grimes Bridge, especially now that Oxbow Road is open. Here's a fun story for you. I was on Oxbow with my children on Sunday, leaving Miss Mary's ice cream cranking, doing 35 miles per hour, which is the exact speed limit on that road. And a gentleman and a Jetta passed me on the left-hand lane, and my 6-year-old said, "Is he allowed to do that?" And I had to say, "No." So he just flew right on by me. I am concerned, not only for folks like myself who are in that situation, but had somebody been walking across the street to the park, any variety of people who live around Grimes Bridge, I want to make sure that we're mitigating situations like that and still slowing down that traffic while we still look at our more long-term solutions, which are things like roundabouts. So even if there's something short-term that we can look at, I think we do need to prioritize that.
And I would like to give a shameless plug, as I'm a big advocate for raised medians. If there was a raised median, that would not have been possible.
Well, look,
Mayor Wilson.
thank you, Mr. Chairman. So Sarah, I have some good news. The speed limit done through the wisdom of the leadership of Mr. Knight and Mr. Littlefield and our police chief, Jim Conroy, is actually 25 miles per hour on the Oxbow Road extension. It's actually 25 as approved by the state of Georgia.
I was right by the speed limit sign, even the sign that checked me. That's why I was like, I am literally doing the speed limit.
It's supposed to be 25. So if you're doing 35, Jim, got a speeder right here, just let him know. The second thing is to let you know is that we have approved a Oxbow Road multi-use path plan as one part of traffic mitigation on Oxbow Road itself, which through the multi-use path plan will include the reduction in the size of lanes on Oxbow Road. It's one of the things we figured out when we got into this Oxbow Road extension plan. When we got into it, we said, oh boy, Oxbow Road extension's a plan, but what about Oxbow Road? And so when we got into it, we said we need to come up with some mitigating issues to help mitigate the traffic on Oxbow Road after Oxbow Road extension's up. So part of that is we came up plan with the multi-use path plan for Oxbow Road, which I believe is in the works. The second part of that is the Oxbow Road multi-use path means by default is that it will affect the size, the width of the lanes on Oxbow Road itself. In other words, they will be decreased. The second part of that, or the third part of that is, which I guess is the Waller Creek, I always call it Waller Creek. I say that bridge part was, it's not really bridge mitigation, but it's tied to the multi-use path. That's a little bit farther down the road. But the other thing is, and to your points there is, and I think we've been working on this, is, yeah, $10 million is a lot of money, and I think we need to be very sober, but we're spending money in not just that $10 million, we're spending money, we spend money out of GF as well to traffic calm impacted areas of Oxbow Road. To your point, same thing on Mimosa, because I think that was our biggest concern about the Oxbow Road extension plan itself was when we got into it was, well, there's obviously going to be increased traffic as the original intent of the plan. What's going to happen to the quality of life? And you probably saw, we caught some criticism for this. As you know, we all went out there, walked the road, and we put up, thanks Jeff, thanks team, we put up what we could that was immediate, which was the delineators as a way of helping to mitigate some of the traffic. So the other thing was to put, to start doing testing on actual what speeding and traffic counts are on Oxbow Road extension before and after, and some of that information still is yet to be delivered, but will be soon.
Thank you. Councilmember Beeson.
100% on board with all of that. For clarity, you guys would know this off the top of your head, you just know all the speed limits in the city. On the Oxbow side closest to Grimes Bridge, which is where I was, that part is still 35. Yeah, that's exactly where I was. So I was driving the speed limit. I was on the Grimes Bridge side. No, so the part that you're talking about, we did walk it. In fact, that was one of the suggestions that I had made, assuming it wouldn't be too cost prohibitive, was looking into expanding those multimodals and trying to break down the size of that street a little bit more. But I do worry that you still have Grimes Bridge that you're feeding into. So you come out of this, what we're doing, what I would like to say, the higher priority at the time, I think, for all of us collectively was making sure we could open Oxbow as soon as possible. and look at a phase 2 with trying to bring down the widths, either through the multimodals, if we wound up doing medians later on, just so we could use Oxbow again. But looking at Grimes Bridge, which it still feeds into, making sure that we're not putting everything on pause for traffic calming then, because we do have a lot of money at our disposal, and we are being mindful, and I do appreciate that approach, but making sure that we're still doing something to impact that, whether it be with the timing of the signals, sensors, even if there's a way that we could bring in the road widths temporarily, whatever we can do that's not cost prohibitive, I think would be incredibly helpful. But I do appreciate Mayor and Council supporting those efforts at this time.
Thank you, sir. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, and I think, and Jeff, that's why I just bring up the procurement piece. I bring that up is just to make our fellow residents aware of the fact that there are some things that the state and the developer may or may not do that potentially could impact some of the projects that some of our traffic calming measures. And so that's why we just have to be sober on some of the stuff, because quite frankly, we don't know where everything will ultimately end up. There could be some changes, who knows? And it could impact how we spend some of our money for traffic mitigation and traffic calming.
Great discussion. Do you all have clarity on the consensus that we all had before that great discussion?
Yes, sir.
Clarity, we have
Excellent,
clarity.
thank you.
All right,
Yes.
all right.
Comment without neighborhood roundabouts.
Without neighborhood roundabouts.
I think we have clarity we need. All right, thank you. Thank you for the guidance. All right, item number 4, consideration to designate personal transportation vehicle crossings.
Well, good evening. This item is talking about PTVs, which are most commonly called golf carts, here in the city of Roswell. And staff wanted to bring forward a couple PTV crossings we thought would improve our network for PTV access. I do want to apologize in advance. In your packets, I only mentioned 3 of these locations. And recently, we had some internal conversation about adding a 4th, mainly because we thought it was designated years ago, but we couldn't find proof of it as it was designated as part of a pathway. But just to be safe, we wanted to make sure the crossing was officially designated, and that was Chafin Road at Hardscrabble. And I have a map to show you here in just a moment.
I thought we did do that one.
We did the path, but not the crossing, and there's no PTV signs there. And our sign shop guys are a little hesitant to put signs without the official blessing. So we just thought this would be a housekeeping item. So I apologize if that causes
But there is
any
one
confusion.
down Hardscrabble closer to the school,
I'm going to
correct?
show you that in just a moment, yes. So these are 4 locations, and we also have a path we want to designate to help link some of the desired locations of golf carts or PTVs, mainly between Canton Street, the Town Square, and the Mill Village area, to make sure they comply with state law. And just a reminder, a PTV has to be on a 25-mile-an-hour roadway. A PTV, according to our ordinance, cannot travel on a road that has a speed limit higher than that. So if the speed limit is 30 or 35 or higher, the golf cart should not be there. But you might see them around town operating on places they may not, they're not supposed to be. So here is a picture I took last year. Can you see what any problem might be with this picture? One, it's on State Route 9, so they didn't have permission legally to cross over a state highway. We don't have a spot for that. But if you notice up here in the right-hand corner, it's the one-way. I'm glad they crossed at a light at least, but they are going the wrong way on a one-way street. So this was one of the problems coming out of Mill Village that we saw last year. So just to give a quick overview of the locations we want to propose to the mayor and council, this is the Hardscrabble Road corridor. Going to the east is Sweet Apple Elementary, Sweet Apple Park. Going to the west is going towards Roswell High School. And as one of the council members just noted, we did designate this Maltese Trail as a PTV eligible facility a few years ago. There's little signs out there now that you can see. And we did have a crossing here at Chafin Road going north. We just wanted to clean this up because we didn't have actual designation for this crossing and just at the roundabout. And we also never could find proof that we designated the Wexford Club Drive crossing. So we wanted to just clean that up. Here's a map showing a wider view of the location. And these maps we have posted on our website for the public to view. The roads in blue are basically the roads PTVs can operate on that are 25 miles an hour or less. Those are usually your residential or subdivision streets. The red lines are the roads with higher speed limits, and basically if you think of it as like a river, you can't cross legally. This light blue line was actually the path that I just spoke about on the Hardscrabble Green Loop project we built a few years ago. So you can ride a golf cart from Roswell High to Sweet Apple, according to this, and you do have a PTV crossing here at Chafin going north. So we just wanted to clean this up to add it here so Wexford could access it legally. We could put signs up next week, and also just to clarify this crossing here so there's no confusion if there was ever a problem there. And I think the bond discussion was mentioned a few minutes ago. One of our bond projects is to help extend this over along Eachus Road in front of Sweet Apple Park, and then ultimately we're going to come back to Mayor and Council with a crossing here to access the commercial development as well. So we can help expand our PTV network. And we also have a couple projects that are on the bond list extending from Roswell High School west over to Super Target and south along King Road. So those are projects in the works. So we're also trying to expand down to Canton Street. So this network will surely grow, and you'll likely see more of these PTV crossings in the future. Here's the example at Chafin North. This is the one that's already approved. We have the signage out there. We just go in and add these signs out there to make it official. You can actually see little tiny signs here along the trail itself. So if you're a PTV on the trail, you get some guidance on that. Here's the one at Wexford. It does not have the designated crossing. We already have the infrastructure in place, an RFB, the median island, so it's all set to go. We just need the designation to post the signage. And here's the one at the roundabout at Chafin. So we once we get the approval, we can put the signage up very quickly. There's a couple others down here near City Hall and the Mill Village. We found out now that Mimosa had the speed limit reduced, it was 30 miles an hour, it was recently reduced to 25, so Mimosa is now PTV eligible. But we wanted to look at some of the crossings that will help get access to Canton Street. This is a big destination for PTVs, for people out going for entertainment or dining. So we wanted to make sure we got a crossing approved here at Magnolia and Mimosa. So that would give PTVs access to Canton Street and also to the south, down towards Bullock Hall, Mimosa Hall, and the town square. And also in that picture I showed you at the beginning with the crossing from Mill Village, we thought Oxbow would be the ideal location, mainly because it's 25 miles an hour, as the mayor mentioned a few minutes ago. We could make this the safest place to cross, and then golf carts could access the Mill Village using the connection here. Now, one thing to note is, I believe it's Elm Street, it's Pleasant Hill runs south, and I think it turns into Elm here, if I'm not mistaken. This little link right here is a one-way street going south. So for PTVs to legally access the Mill Village, there is a small pedestrian multi-use trail path to the east here. We'd want to designate that just to give an official legal way for golf carts to access the Mill Village and the Oxbow Road crossing. And this is kind of an illustration of the route they would take. So you'd basically be connecting three major points of interest, obviously Canton Street, the Mill Village, and the town square and the Bullock Hall area. So if staff, we're recommending approval of all 4 PTV crossings and the one pathway. The one thing we will have to request, given this crossing State Route 9, we would have to request it through GDOT. So GDOT would have to approve that. That would be our next step, but we wanted to run it through the mayor and council first. And if approved, we'd start generating and installing the new signage right away. Our sign shop could implement that within a few days. And obviously, we'd update our PTV maps on the city website once it's approved. So with that, I'll yield for questions, Mr. Chairman.
Councilmember Palermo.
So thank you, Mr. Knight, and Mr. Cox, thank you. Definitely great stuff. I certainly support staff's recommendation and will gladly be supporting moving that forward. I do want to mention, actually, we got some really, I thought, great emails from multiple different residents today. There was a resident, Ryan, I believe Councilmember Hills is going to be sending you the email, who had some additional recommendations. One of them was taking into account with the Southern Post going up soon, et cetera, and that connection to, right, exactly. So I think those are things I'd like to staff to weigh in on as well. I don't know if you'd want to do that as a part of this or do that separately. I certainly don't want to throw the information at you, given the request just came in today.
Yeah, we saw that email. Thank you for forwarding that. That was one, and just for the audience, this was at Fraser and Forest Street at Norcross. We did think about that. I know the Southern Post development isn't online yet, but likely will be within the next several months. That would likely be a candidate, so you could access City Hall and point south. The issue over near Waller Park, we'd have to coordinate with our Parks Department because they don't allow motorized vehicles on their parks, so I want to maybe get a little clarity through Parks to make sure that's okay. I don't think it'll be a problem, but I just want to run that to ground with them. But those are definitely good suggestions moving forward.
So the question is, the Norcross one, should we do today or should we save that for a separate time, given it's not offline? I'm flexible to whatever this committee prefers.
Mayor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dave, Jeff, guys, well done. And to Director, not Leadville, sorry, but Director Leatherman, probably want to, let's talk about some of this related, perhaps for the next committee meeting, we talk about this relation to some of the parks and some of the PTV. And one other thing, probably want to think about with relation to the massive trails project that's going to be done at City Hall, that is about, I guess, about to go to design, getting close, how that potentially could be impacted, where you want that potentially impacted with some PTV intersection, I'm sure, particularly when you're looking at some of the points of entry into the City Hall complex grounds. Not just this, but because there's a lot there. So we probably need to put that on the ground as well.
Councilmember Hall. Oh.
Okay. And I just also want to remind the public that we have a program that I introduced, I think, probably 3 years ago, where they can crowdsource their own ATV crossings. So if there are neighborhoods that perhaps need to cross a road, they can get together and basically come to the city, crowdsource that, and the city will do that for them. It's not necessarily off of a public path, but neighborhoods could connect to each other and
Yes, there is a process for that to move forward, yes.
Christine, can you, because that's a really cool project, can you elaborate on that a little bit so people know? Because probably a lot of people probably don't know they can do that, and they'd probably be interested in doing that.
So just to explain, I wish I could give a better example, but just using this map here, I'll just pick out a random spot on the map. Let's say there was a subdivision.
I actually have an example. That was one of the ones I was going to bring up. If you want to use that example, because I don't think these folks know that they're crossing illegally. That one.
Okay.
It's Edenwild Drive connects, that's Edenwild on the right-hand side on Etris. It goes directly across to Magnolia Crescent. That's Wexford. Those are two separate neighborhoods. People cross there all the time. I don't think they know they're not supposed to.
So this actually these are two 25-mile-an-hour roads. We could put this as a crossing now. You just have to put signage up and the mayor and council designate it. But to Councilmember Hall's point, let's say this subdivision up here wanted to build a crossing. They don't have a way where to cross. They'd have to put some kind of improvements for the golf cart to reach the destination. The problem with Roswell is the way the development pattern was built out over the past several decades. A lot of these are, cul-de-sacs. They don't line up. You don't have nice, perfect cross-street intersections like that. A lot of them, they're T intersections. So to get across, you might have to travel, 100 feet, 500 feet down the road. That's where it gets a little expensive.
All right, Councilmember Beeson?
So using that example, I guess, without having to tell those two neighborhoods of Edenwald and Wexford HOAs to having to come together, is there any way that we could designate that crossing that you just highlighted there? Because I see folks use it all the time to get to school, and I don't think that they know that they're not supposed to.
I'll have to take a look at it, but just based on that, it looks like they're both eligible. We could make that a PTV crossing if
Okay,
the
great,
council
thank
desired.
you.
Now, the only thing is to access the school, they would not legally be able to go up and down Etris because the sidewalk's not wide
So
enough.
the way that they legally can access the school, hypothetically speaking, if I lived in Edenwild, you could come across, go through Wexford and go to that one that you just added and still get to the school.
That's correct.
So that would be their only legal method of Edenwild even accessing the PTV pathways, is going through Wexford and using their access point. So I just would like to add that as an additional crossing if possible, so that we're allowing Edenwild, which is a massive neighborhood, to connect into that access point through Wexford.
I think that'd be acceptable.
Councilmember Morthland?
Question about the crossings themselves from the driver's perspective of the driver. Are these supposed to be treated the same way a school bus stop sign that pops out from the school bus? Or are you supposed to stop in both directions until the golf cart gets across? Or once it clears your lane, are you allowed to continue on?
But no, there's no signalization for these crossings. I mean, the only one we had would be at Oxbow and Highway 9 that has a traffic signal. So the PTV or golf cart would be operating like a motor vehicle on the roadway. But in these other crossings, there are actually Magnolia and Mimosa also has a signal. But these right here, there's no new signalization. There is an RFB right here. I've seen some PTVs use them. I've seen some not. I don't think it's required they activate them, but they can legally cross cross there.
So the real earnest falls to the golf cart driver around drive at your own risk here. It is not one of these where the golf cart starts proceeding through the traffic and everybody's supposed to stop across the board.
They don't have the right of way.
No, they don't have the right of way.
As you would if you're a pedestrian in the crosswalk.
Correct.
Yes.
Councilmember Hills?
Thank you. Councilmember Morthland just wants to know if the law applies to him or just everybody else with his cart. I'm kidding. Back to the pathway that is parallel to, that's on Sloan Street and Maple. Can you elaborate just a little bit on that? What's going on the one-way street? How are our PTVs behaving there, and why is this, I know this is news to you all, but
I'm not sure how they're behaving. The photo I had at the beginning was someone crossing illegally here. I don't know if they're following the rules of the road or not.
I've seen them cross at 9
yeah.
from Oxbow.
But some, I believe, have been seen, not bad people just making a short route.
Uninformed.
Yes, are going the opposite direction of the one-way, correct? So this pathway, designated pathway, would give an alternate that's right there, not
Yeah.
too far away, to make it easy to go the right direction.
This just gives them a legal opportunity to reach their destination without breaking the law.
Thank you. That's a really narrow street too, the one-way. Thank you.
Mayor Wilson?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. So everybody, obviously, well, not everybody, but a lot of us are very excited about PTV transportation through the city and that growing and how it positively impacts the quality of life. As an owner of a PTV, and Director Gaines, I don't know if you want to come up here and talk about the PTV process a little bit, but one of the things, just kind of informing folks, is that if you drive a PTV, you've got to get a permit from the city if you want to be on the streets. And there are other requirements. Jason, if you want to address it just a little bit, because I know the police, I think, and you are doing some videos right now, because we had a tragic accident 6 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, in trying to remember which Land O'Lakes, where we had youngsters driving and very, very serious injuries. And so we have rules for good reason about the driving of PTVs. And I don't know, Jason, if you want to address that some, just to kind of let everybody know what some of the rules are.
Yeah, so community development is not involved in the permitting of PTVs. It does involve the police department, and it also involves transportation, I believe. But yeah, community development is not involved in that permit issuing process.
My mistake. I apologize for my ignorance. So who does the permitting on PTVs?
It's on our city website. People can apply for it. They have to pay a small fee to register their vehicle, and they pay that fee right down the hall here. And it is on the way the application is written is that it's on the applicant to make sure their vehicle is compliant with local and state law.
Well, I just want to make sure I inform people, because when I came in and got my PTV permit, I could have sworn to you I went down to ComDev and got it and paid for it down there. So maybe it's been a while. Maybe I'm mistaken on that, Jason, so I apologize. So where can we tell folks they can get their PTV permits?
The best place, I always tell people to Google Roswell PTV. That'll take you to our webpage. It has all the information on how to apply, a lot of FAQs. It also has maps similar to this showing where you can and cannot operate currently. So yeah, if you just search for the Roswell PTV on Google, that'll take you right there.
And can people get their PTV permits online?
You can print them out. You do have to bring them in and pay the fee in person. I do not believe you can pay it remotely.
So we still,
Basically come here.
so our poor residents still got to come inside City Hall and get a permit, right?
Not on their PTV, they can't.
But not on their PTV. Okay, they can drive or walk here or ride a bike. All right. And where do they go in City Hall when they want to pay for their permit?
They can go to the cashier's office just down the hall here in the rotunda on the second floor.
Second floor. Thank you, Dave. But since Jim's not here, Jason, anybody want to comment on some of the simple rules in terms of how old you have to be? Do you do you have your driver's license, et cetera, et cetera? So folks need to know this, because we do have, and I can tell you in my own neighborhood, I'm sure a lot of other people share the same thing, you have 10 and 11 and 12-year-old children driving a PTV, and we want to discourage that at the highest level, even though it makes it easy sometimes for parents, for kids to get in them.
Yeah, on the screen here, this is some of the things from our application. This is not the entire application. That's what it looks like right there.
There's the age,
But-
16 or older.
Yeah. Up here in the upper right-hand corner, you can read that. I apologize for the small text, but you have to be at least 16 years of age. You have to be holding a valid driver's license. And then also there's some weight restrictions and speed requirements. Your PTV should not be exceeding 20 miles an hour on a flat surface. There's also some weight requirements. And then the affidavit part basically has the applicant confirm that they're applying or complying with all local and state regulations. And they're supposed to renew it every 5 years.
Thank you, Dave. And just as a reminder, the police will be doing some videos. Sharon, the police will be doing videos on PTVs, PTV safety, PTV compliance. Because obviously, I know, Mike, one of your dreams has been to connect, for example, my neighborhood and all the neighborhoods.
All over Roswell.
All over Roswell, connecting them to all different parts of east, west, and to downtown. And there's we got some cool stuff going. But with that comes, let's be safe while we're doing it.
Absolutely. And with that, I'd like to motion to move forward.
Motion by Councilmember Palermo, second by Councilmember Hills.
Just one clarifying question. Are we adding those 2 extra ones? The one up by Edenwild and the one at Norcross and Forest Fraser?
Yes, I'd like to add those 2 as part of my motion.
Very good.
All right, Councilmember Palermo accepts that as part of his motion, so the second stands, second by Councilmember Hills. Any further discussion? All in favor? All in favor, it passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And that does conclude the August 29, 2023 Community Development and Transportation Committee meeting. We'll entertain a motion of adjournment. Motion by Councilmember Hills, second by Councilmember Morthland. All in favor? Thank you very much. Have a wonderful evening. 6:15.